Welcome to the Passive Mobile Home Park Investing Podcast with your host, Andrew Keel. This is the podcast where you can get the education you need to invest 100% passively in the highly profitable niche of mobile home parks.
Welcome to the Passive Mobile Home Park Investing Podcast. This is your host, Andrew Keel, and today we have a couple of owner-operators in the mobile home park space on the show in Mr. Dylan Stewart and Alex Donalow of Mavdon Investments. Dylan and Alex have always had entrepreneurship in their blood. Both individually were in the single-family business and partnered up on the single-family side to form Mavdon. As they continued with their nationwide single-family flipping, it wasn't until the end of 2018 when they closed on their first mobile home park outside of St. Louis, Missouri. Since then, they have closed on 6 more mobile home parks with several more in escrow. They currently own 117 lots and are closing on another 176 in June here in 2021, so next month. They have been able to build a rockstar team around them to find, purchase, and turn around value-add mobile home parks. In addition, they love to give value to other investors through their Facebook and YouTube channel. The Facebook group is called the Elite MHP Investing Group. Dylan and Alex, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Andrew. Yeah, definitely excited to be here with you and your listeners.
It's an absolute pleasure to be on and look forward to diving in here. So
Totally.
Don't beat us up too bad.
Oh, definitely not. Maybe you guys can start out by telling us your story and how you got into manufactured housing.
Yeah. Well, it was, for me, it was just this serendipitous thing. We were actually trying to sell a single family property. I will correct you. It was the end of 2019 that we bought our first mobile home park. So it was even less time under our belt, but we feel like we're doing well. And so we were trying to sell a single family deal. We did test blasts, and this buyer was like, hey, I'm not looking to buy, but I'm looking to sell a mobile home park. And us as investors, we look for opportunity no matter where that is. And we knew that we wanted to get into larger deals. We just didn't know when that opportunity would arise. And so found this park, and it is just right outside of St. Louis, not far from your Edwardsville property too. And so we ended up buying it and then bought a few more around there. And then just as we went through 2019, stabling and figuring out how to do this mobile home park investing thing, we really started ramping things up at the end of this past year, and we're continuing to. And so we love it. And, like we said, we got a team around us that we kind of continuing to fill in the positions so Alex and I can focus on running the business and working in the business and working on the business.
Yeah, I love that. So literally, you guys just through your single family wholesaling business sourced a mobile home park seller.
Yeah. And so I will say, mobile home parks had been on the horizon. That was kind of the angle. Like everybody else, we're like, all right, we want to get into, mobile home parks, self-storage, but it was more like a 5-year goal. At the time, we had really just started getting the systems in place for our single family to where, we could actually consider ourselves like successful wholesalers. It was really just to that point. Like we were building momentum. We had the team in place. Even to where the team was like, really, now we're buying mobile home parks. Like we just got all this in place. But for Dylan and I, we just knew we couldn't really pass down that opportunity. We had a mobile home park seller, a great price. I mean, it was 12 lots, 150 grand. There was, lot rents were at 150. We just saw dollar signs, and all public utilities. And so, we went for it and quickly realized if we were going to scale it, it was going to require our full attention. And so, but yeah, it was just through osmosis of our single family that first deal kind of came into place, but it was on the horizon, and that was what kind of made us quickly pull the trigger.
Yeah. And it was interesting because for us, we had to kind of take some steps back, because when you're flipping single family properties, it's a transactional, lucrative business. And so now we're saying, hey, we're sacrificing it in the short term of maybe our income to focus on the long term of the owning these properties, having legacy wealth. And now, just as you mentioned, it's like we can take our portfolio from 117 lots to over 300 in such a short time just by buying the right properties. And so it's super exciting. It gets us fired up, our team fired up, and just the impact we can make.
Yeah, that is so amazing. A lot of people have been hearing about mobile home parks, and it's kind of this buzz asset class right now, like this buzzword, from Bigger Pockets and other avenues. People are kind of flooding to this, but you guys kind of stumble upon it on somewhat of an accident, is very serendipitous. So that's pretty neat. What has been the toughest hurdle for you guys in the business?
I think for us, if I'll hit on that first, like we coming from the single family space and running an acquisition based business, we've kind of always understood that finding the deals. And then of course, if you have the right deal, getting the money in place has been simple because, money kind of flocks to a good deal. And then of course, now for us is we want to, as you mentioned before and other people talk about is you can take a bad operator can take a good deal to bad, but a good operator can take a bad deal to excellent. And so for us, as we know in this industry, being younger entrepreneurs, we want to master that operational side of things. You can find a deal, but how are you going to actually be able to refinance out? Are you going to be able to exit at your cap rate that you're looking for? Are you getting your expenses to where they need to be? Are you still operating way too high? And so I think the operational side has been something that we've really, really been overcoming and, getting a bit more systems in place, keeping it replicatable, because as we're buying new deals, it's just, we want to have like clockwork. We have our checklist, we have our systems and management in place. And so, and then managing construction has always been something that we're constantly learning. And so we have a team member that's solely focused on that, on managing construction. And then we're bringing in a team member to do infill and stuff like that. So just the operational side has been fun.
I think that right there, because for us, it's the biggest thing I would say to sum that up is like what a lot of people touch on is the paradox of trying to scale a team. Like, do you scale? How quickly do you scale? How quickly do you hire? Like, is it too early? Is it too soon? And so for us, we, the biggest thing has been, if we're going to scale, we have to let go of more parts of the business, right? And focus on the bigger picture. And that's been the biggest. I mean, we were managing the first couple parks, ourselves pretty much. It was me and Dylan, and then our site manager. We had no management team in place, and so really that's just been an evolution of how do we go to the drawing board and step back away from the business and delegate. And we've really just we kind of just finally made a decision to say, all right, we're going to hire every position that needs hired. If there's a hat that needs filled, we're just going to hire them, and we're going to make it work. And we trusted that process. Now we have this great team around us, and we never had to turn the lights off or anything like that. And so, yeah,
that's great. And I know from experience that is very tough to do. For new operator, and you come into the business, and what you end up doing is sacrificing cash flow to invest into your management company. So maybe you can touch on that. How did you guys learn the operations side? Was it just trial by fire? You kind of just jumped in? Did you go to the Frank and Dave boot camp? What'd you guys do to learn?
Yeah, so I'll touch on that. Just to preface real quick too, like our jump into mobile home parks, like really all we knew going in was that it was like clean cash flow. That was kind of what we liked about it. It was like, it's better than rentals. We don't, kind of the basic fundamental benefits of mobile home park investing is what we knew. We were comparing it to single family, but we didn't know the whole bigger picture of the demand and the affordable housing crisis. We just hadn't gone so deep into how hot this was going to be just yet. We just knew, hey, this is way better than single family. So we kind of went in and we were like, we'll just hire a site manager, they'll run it. To us, it was a big win just to have 12 units and to be collecting, 1,800 or 2,000 in rents each month. That was a big jump on one property. And so we hired a site manager, quickly ran into all the issues we could. We were getting personal calls on our cell phones from the police, your calls from residents that the manager was showing up drunk, and like, it was just, it was a mess. And so then we went third party, and that we had all the war stories that everybody, fortunately we got to like flesh out all the war stories early on with some small parks. We really did. Our third party management was horrible. They didn't get anything done. We ended up filling in all the cracks. I'll let Dylan touch in because he really heads up a lot of the asset management and stuff. And now our management system is really the key to our success. So I'll kind of let Dylan touch on the evolution of that.
Yeah. And I think that's a good question for any investors to ask the operators that they're looking to invest with is, how do you guys manage your properties? Do you guys outsource entirely to someone else, or do you guys do it all in-house and get to understand how they do that. Because for us, like Alex said, we tried to outsource quickly. So there was a local management company and they were in single family and they had done some multifamily, and we're like, hey, we might want to trust these guys as they can grow with us. We shared the vision, it was aligned, and we just realized no one else cares about your properties as much as you do. And so we had to take that back into our court. And so since this, me as a believer, I think God has a way and a plan bigger than ours. And so same thing, literally a serendipitous thing that we met another individual who was from Facebook, and I'd seen that she was starting to manage and operate some parks. She had done it for over a decade. And so I made a contact to her. I said, hey, here's who we are. Here's what we're doing. Here's where we're going. And over, 6 months, we built a relationship, and now she's with us full time. And so it's like, she still does a little bit with other parks. And now as we're continuing to grow, she's riding alongside of us. And so it's kind of like an umbrella under an umbrella. She's exclusively with us, but she has some team members in place to help with working with the residents, dealing with kind of just small repairs and everything. So that's how we do our management is fortunately, she's done it for a decade and she's continuing to do it. And so she does all of our collections. She's very, very diligent to giving us our reports and everything. And so we watch over it as like a hawk, because now there's someone else involved to want to make sure that nothing's getting dropped. But it was kind of exciting. This park we just closed on this past Friday. This was the first time to where, she was actually out on site meeting with the residents. We weren't even there. She was doing face-to-face saying, hey, new ownership, new management, contact me directly. And the closing prior to that, I was the one doing that. And so even though she was still doing the operations, I was the one actually meeting the residents. And so it was kind of an exciting milestone for us to be, fully disconnected from the residents.
Yeah, that's great. That's really great. So as you guys grow, do you plan to, grow the management company in-house, or is it like this umbrella under your umbrella that's going to like help build her business, or how does that work?
So we're going to grow with her. Right. And I know it's kind of confusing because everybody does it differently. And I think that's one thing that's so crucial about this industry is find what works for you. Not everybody wants to go to 5,000 lots, 50,000 lots, 500 lots, whatever it is. And so for us, this structure, she's going to grow her team, and we're going to be very involved having our metrics and KPIs. She's a team member, and her team members are our team members.
Well, she'll probably listen to this. The truth is, She'll probably want to branch out, but we're going to try to keep her in-house.
Yeah, right.
It's like we want to keep her in-house, but she's really good at what she does, and she's specific to mobile home parks, and she saw a demand and a void in the industry for good just in-house management that could be systemized. And so she's great right now. She manages our whole portfolio and will continue to do so, and hopefully it'll stay that way. And that was the goal. In the beginning, we were like, all right, the only way to make this work is to go in-house. It's just a matter of when do you find the right person. And fortunately, like Dylan said, she kind of solicited her services, and it just, it's been absolutely great. I mean, she helps with our investors, sending out reports, doing project updates. It's like a 3-tier system between Dylan, her, and the site manager. It's just really working very smoothly so far. And it's giving us that confidence going into these bigger parts. Our first, we're closing on 124 unit, and couldn't imagine trying to do that the old way with us managing these. So,
yeah. And just to touch on that even more, so we still have a virtual assistant exclusively that does our unit marketing, screening, and then, seeing if they're qualified to move in. And so we still manage that 100% because we don't want someone else to slow down, not saying that this individual would, but we don't want someone else to slow down how quickly we can fill quality residents into the park. And so we still control that.
Yeah. How do you guys source your deals?
Every way we can, honestly. So we use primarily cold calling. Honestly, one thing that's worked really well for us is even when our acquisition guy knows that if he's having a phone call with the seller, to look on Google and hop down in Street View. As weird as it sounds, it's old fashioned, it's kind of slow. You can hire a virtual assistant to do this. We've done that, but they might not be on Google, but they have a sign in front of their park going down to Google Street. And so we have him constantly building a database, calling sellers that way. And then online, Craigslist, Facebook Marketplace. And one tip for your listeners, we'll give out some nuggets is even when you see people selling mobile homes, contact them, say, hey, I saw you're selling a few mobile homes. Do you want to sell the park? Because if we have a mobile home up for sale and someone contacts us, we're owners, we're operators, and we will be open to an offer. So other people might do the same.
And I'd really say we do more. It's really more targeted marketing to this day than any sort of shotgun approach or anything like that. I mean, we pull lists, but there's so much bycatch. our cold callers end up complaining that this list is trash or whatever. And so it's like, it's like you have the best luck really if going and doing targeted marketing. Craigslist works great if people are selling mobile homes and you can get in touch with the actual owner of the park who's just listing a home or renting a home. That's been a great fruitful source. Now that we're in heavy acquisition mode, we have bought a couple of wholesale deals just because the right deal comes our way. We enjoy working with wholesalers, and there's lots of deals to be had. It's just for us, we find that some of the best deals that work for our model don't end up on the lists. Even we find them on Google, and so don't deny that approach by any means.
Yeah, and maybe you could tell us a little bit about your deal criteria. What is that model? What is the the park that Mavdon Investments goes after?
Yeah. Absolutely. Well, if I can backtrack on one thing, and hopefully this is applicable to your listeners, Andrew, is whether if you're an investor passively or actively, always respond to your emails with a wholesaler or a broker. If they're sending you a deal, like we are on a VIP list because we've executed on deals with some wholesalers. So now we see those first. Even if I see a deal or acquisition guy sees a deal and it doesn't meet our criteria, we will still email an offer. We've had offers come in at 200,000 less, and we've literally gotten a reduction over an email without even talking. Say, hey, it's probably not going to work. Here's where we're at, or 500,000, whatever it is. So always give people your feedback. Don't say, hey, it's not going to work. Say why, location, size, the quality of the asset, price. Give people feedback so that they can find better deals for you in the future. But our criteria, primarily, we prefer to have 30 homes. Everybody says lots, but we look at homes, right? Because you can have a 100-lot park, but if there's 5 homes, is it like for us, we don't want to do that massive infill right now. And so we at least want 30 homes, but preferably over 50 lots, public utilities, everything that everybody else has. We just bought on a treatment plant in Ohio. And the only reason we did that is because we can hook into public utilities there.
Very nice. Yeah, that'll be a huge, huge project. Is that like going to happen? Are you guys
That's
planning
underway? Yeah, that was it was a fun project. We worked with a wholesaler out there out of Ohio, and did a lot of due diligence on this deal. Spoke with a lot of mentors and consultants just about the packaging plants and how that was going to go, and that was just kind of the light bulb that went off. We're like, all right, if we can get approval to tap into the sewer before we close, and that's like it's a golden nugget. And then worst case, like the packaging plant is really in good condition. We met with the servicing company, we saw the backlogs. It was just something we felt pretty confident in, and then we just worked really hard and kind of got approval before we even closed. We had the city willing to give us a grant. Fortunately, they're very adamant on getting everyone off those packaging plants out in this particular area. And so it's underway right now. We just finalized a refinance on that. We're getting the funds for that, and that'll kind of finish up the project. The engineers are finalizing plans and stuff. So we'll definitely keep you apprised on how our first conversion goes, because lots of people want to know how, updates on that, but we're definitely feeling good about it. So
yeah, that's great. I mean, that's value add right there, the hard way.
And I think
as far as criteria, I mean, like Dylan said, we're doing heavy cold calling and stuff. So really we can be picky with our utilities and stuff. I mean, we're pretty much buying all public utilities, tenant-owned homes. And then the biggest thing is just running it through our pro formas and making sure it's going to hit, since we're working with outside capital, making sure it's going to hit, refinance profits and cash on cash and everything. And that's kind of the main thing. Other than that, we can get creative. If there's park-owned homes, we'll play around with them. If we've got to do infill, we'll play around with it. It just depends on it. We're getting 21st approved right now, and kind of actually just brought in an infill specialist who's going to strictly handle that for all of our parks. So it's going to help us.
I think that's huge, man. And a lot of operators,
wow.
Yeah, a lot of operators shy away from big infill projects, because it is a lot of work. There's no doubt about it, and it's tough, with transporters and installers to, with third parties to get them to abide by your schedule. So I think that's huge that you're going to have someone just dedicated to that, because, you can really double your money. If you can say a budget, what's your budget to fill an occupied lot, say with a used home?
We're always factoring at least 20 to 25 grand And if we do less, great. If we do more, then hopefully, yeah, we're not.
Yeah, which is great. And in Ohio and Indiana, we've been able to do it for about 15
Yeah.
grand, to fill in a vacant lot with a used home. Nice, maybe it's metal on metal. But you fill that lot rent's 350, you just added about 30 grand plus to the value of the asset by filling that one lot and spending that 15 grand. So,
Yep.
that's a huge value to this business. And
I love it. Well, another thing I'll say, because I know a lot of your listeners are more of the passive, and when you're looking to see if this deal makes sense for you to invest, make sure it's not hinging just on one thing if it's going to make or break the deal. So in this situation, us doing this treatment plant conversion and hooking up to public utilities, we made sure the deal still would work, even if that fell through. And so that's a big thing. Is I see some operators out there like, oh man, we're going to be able to do this, this, and this. Like, what happens? Worst case scenario? Does the deal still work? And for us, fortunately, we can say it does.
That's great. Yeah, that's huge. So what mistakes have you guys made and how did you recover from them?
Oh man, so many going through my head.
I think one big one for me that, is just really verifying collections to a T. I mean, we're really thorough with DD in general. I mean, I would say that was a lesson learned in the beginning, was just being more nonchalant with DD. I mean, I think in your first kind of deals, you're like, you're ambitious, you want to get it closed. You got earnest in, right? And like our first couple of deals we closed in-house. And so we were just pretty ambitious to get them closed. But then things came out like collections and, not having titles to homes and just small things that we didn't verify. So it's like, all right, be more tight with DD. But then specifically, I would say, that's one thing that's really hard is you don't really get to meet every tenant face to face before closing on a deal. You get to look at financials, you get to kind of look at leases, get a feel for the demographic and everything. But really, you don't know if day one you're just going to have no rents show up. And so it really takes that on-site verification. And I think that's been the biggest thing, is like not being afraid to ask the site managers more questions or be more invasive or say, no, I want to get in and see all the homes. Just making sure you're super tight with DD and then being extra conservative on your pro formas. I mean, what can go wrong if you do that, right? And so that's one thing we do, is like anytime, I do a lot of the underwriting, the financial models, pro formas, and then Dylan will review it, and kind of the whole team will review and be like, all right, how can we be more conservative? How can we account for more, and that's what we do. And then if it still meets, like, we're closing, baby. That's just kind of, that's kind of our model. And so I think that's one thing that still to this day, there's really no system around how do you just verify that every tenant's actually paying rent, just going off some pieces of paper. And so good, strong DD and just getting to meet the site manager, I think, is important as well.
Yeah, a couple of ways, would be like, bank statements. But, if a lot of these mom and pops are still collecting cash, and they might not make it to the bank statement, that, that's an issue, which we run across a lot. And then there's estoppel certificates, which has saved us a couple times where, the seller didn't have the security deposits correct and things like that. But yeah, due diligence is so important. And every deal we buy, we learn something new and we add to our DD checklist, and you just get better and better as you go on. So
of course, and just to preface, yeah, of course, if you've got tax returns and bank statements, it's helpful. And we're closing on a lot of those smaller mom and pop deals where there is some trust going into it. And that's why as you scale into the bigger deals and you let the banks do a lot of the work for you, it's nice to, really make sure everything's in place, and have, your agency bank's going to close with you, you got a good deal in place as well.
And I think you hit on a really good point, Andrew, that we've been discovering that and expected it. Each deal, you're going to learn something new. And I think a big difference from just an investor and an operator, someone who's a business owner, is when you learn things, you put it into a system and a process and make it duplicatable. And so that's one thing that we've been learning constantly, is like something comes up, immediately make it duplicatable for the next closing. And so I think another mistake that we made before is just, we're so excited to close on a deal, but that sometimes things go and miss. And so just make sure, as simple as it sounds, that everything's ready for closing. From, are the residents going to be able to pay online? Who are they calling? We use CallRail for a number flow. It's like, Can they speak to site managers, general managers? Like, how are they getting hold of you? And so there's so many small things, and just making sure you're ready for that transition. And secondly is just construction, making sure when you're working with contractors that you have an agreement in place when you're starting, when you finished, and how much are you going to pay me if you don't finish work on time, or what's kind of those expectations. And so having it clear with them throughout the project.
Yeah. One thing we ran into, just dealing with a lot of these like more, handyman types instead of like full on general contractors is, making sure that they'll guarantee their work, like if the, you sell a home, someone moves in, we make sure it's in our contracts that, hey, if something happens, they're going to come back and they're going to guarantee that job. And that's been huge, because the last thing you want to do is have to, chase people down. Let me ask you guys this. This is a big one. What are the most important things that passive investors, we're talking limited partners, what do they need to look out for when investing into mobile home parks?
Great question. The first is obviously, the operator. I would say if you're going to be investing passively, like we've already discussed, the operator comes first. Finding and verifying and speaking with an operator that's finding good deals, understanding what criteria makes for a good deal, making sure that they understand your goals. Are you looking to be into the parks long term? Are you looking to kind of turn your money around short term? And then, what sort of structure are you looking for too? To be honest with you, a lot of our structures have been more joint ventures, and investors that are like, look, I took Frank and Dave. I want to be a part of this. I want to learn. I kind of maybe have a long-term goal of owning my own park someday. How can I bring a little more to the table and kind of do more of a joint venture structure? Unfortunately, with us doing some smaller parks up to this point, we've been able to do that and get some wind in our sails working under joint ventures. And then also that's helped build our network and expand our network. And so as far as the parks specifically, again, what's the exit strategy? What's the backup plan if the exit strategy doesn't work? How many people are in place? If you're an LP, is there a sponsor in place? What's the structure for the sponsor? And how many GPs are in place? I think just getting to verify the operational system, the management system, to me, those are the first things that come to mind. If I've never obviously invested passively in a deal, but if I was, knowing what I know, that's the first thing I would look at. What's the management system? Who are the operators? And then I would go into the logistics of the deal and really just make sure that, there's a backup plan when things don't go wrong. 1, 2, 3 exit strategies, which we make sure to have on all our parks.
Yeah. That's
and asking those tough questions too, right? Like, if something happens with the operator, who's managing the deal? If something were to happen to the property, who's responsible for that? If the LP, has something catastrophic happen, they need to get their money out. How is the GP working with them on that? Like different things. And we're not attorneys. And like I said, we still haven't done a full syndication yet, but we're constantly educating because we're still working with investors on a partnership basis at this moment. And so we want to be able to answer those. And another thing is the GP in this situation should know the deal. Like as an LP, you should be able to ask any question. Say, hey, I was going through your, we had the same conversation yesterday, Alex. We had investors say, hey, exactly, ask about collections, delinquencies, how's, the bill backs going? Because I noticed on the spreadsheet, it said this, and you should be able to ask and answer those pretty quickly because you know the deal well.
Yeah, that's a good point. I'd be curious to know. Sorry, go ahead.
Last thing is I think we gave good insight into the raw transparency of what a good operator or what an investor should ask. Is that, any team, no matter how well structured, no matter how well the systems are in place, like things get missed. Any deal, things get missed. And it's your job as an investor to kind of go through, verify the documents. And while you want to know and trust your operator, you also want to go through and see if there's anything they missed. And that's one thing. When an investor brings something up and they're like, hey, I went through the pro forma and I saw this, we don't try to argue or let pride get in the way. We go back and work on it, and we see it as another eye on the deal, and so don't be afraid to pick apart the deal and ask the hard questions too.
Yeah. I'd be curious to know what is one of the best questions you've been asked by an investor?
That would be more for Alex, I think, on the conversations you've had.
Yeah, the best question we've been asked by an investor.
I think I'm going to add this to like my regular roll call questions, because I think, this conversation brought that up. That's good to ask operators. I think one of the better questions I got, and I get it consistently, is like, hey, what is the worst case scenario? And like you mentioned, Dylan, like what happens, right? And they always ask about the tornado situation, where the tornado comes through and rips up, half the trailers in the park. What does that look like? And, we have loss of income insurance that would help with that. And that's a big, safe fail there. But also it's pretty unlikely, knock on wood here, that that the whole park would be mixed, captured out of there, where usually, maybe a couple homes would be affected, but not the whole park. And that's, probably why we don't buy in hurricane zones, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I think, to be honest with you, nothing comes off the top of my head because Alex has more investor calls than I have on the hardest question. But we did a call yesterday, actually, just because we were working with a heavy investor and we wanted to both be on there. And a question that was asked is, hey, there's high rent owns on this park. What happens in the event of a lot of them default? They decide to move out, or, how do, same thing. How do you evict someone with a tenant-owned home? Do they have to move their home? This and that. So even though they're not hard questions, they're simple questions, but a good operator should know how to answer them. And
well, what's funny is before you brought up loss of income, it was an investor who I think they got it from one of your podcasts, actually brought up loss of income to us, and then we engaged loss of income. That's how you grow. An investor was like, hey, it's like we were 3 parks deep at the time, 4 parks deep. And we hadn't been doing loss of income, and we were working with mobile insurance, and we would try to get it on our parks. And then when we wouldn't get it the first go around, we just kind of like, all right, and then we learned later on just the importance of it. Right. But it was one of our investors who was like, hey, do you have loss of income on the parks? None of our parks were in at the time any sort of, major concern zones or anything like that. But it is a huge fail safe, like you said, to have in place. And of course, I get the question too all the time, what's worst case scenario? What if you die? What if the tornado comes through? And kind of, just the Matt Faircloth answer to that is like, investing's risky. You're asking me, could the absolute worst case scenario happen? I guess on like a very rare day it could, but from our track record and from the way we analyze deals, most likely that's not going to happen. And that's typically just my response to that,
Yeah. And it's nice there's 2 of you, right? So you got to back up. Exactly. Not that we would want anything to happen to either, but
yeah, exactly.
That is a question I've gotten before, and they want like investors ask about, hey, do you have like a insurance policy, a life insurance, I forget the name of it, but like the important person insurance or something like that.
Yeah, we did that. We went and did that because it was another great thing an investor brought up. Investors will make sure to make sure you're doing everything properly. And that's what a good investor should be doing is helping your operator. Not that you should be doing their job for them, but it's like, it's a team effort in the end. As far as with us, with these joint ventures and everything, it's been great. And we give some, some of our heavy investors that, and partners, they've got, roles and responsibilities where they can help us verify, invoices and contractor bids. And that really helps keep us in line of like, all right, we're working with partners on this deal. And so
that's great. That's for those passive investors listening, if you can bring more than just money, if you have that knowledge of, the business and you can contribute, that's huge, especially, for new operators just getting started. That's really good insights you're getting from your limited partners.
Absolutely. And just to, end that, I'll plug Ferd Neiman here. Obviously he does all our legal work and structures everything. And we will be moving into more LP situations now as we get into these bigger deals with his help. And we're no professionals in that arena, but excited to be doing some syndications as well. And so, yeah.
Awesome. Yeah. I love Ferd. He's been on the show and a wealth of information.
Yeah, my mind's blown every time I have a phone call with him. I'm like, oh, wow. The reason we pay him the big bucks, right?
Yeah.
When he sends it, I'm like, the amount of value we got.
Yeah.
Well, and that's another thing for an investor who's looking to invest in a project, or you're investing in a project, but you're investing more in the operator. And it's just the little things. Like Alex and I are very relational and personal people. And so are they responding to your emails in a timely manner? Do they answer your texts? Do they answer your phone calls? And like, I think there's, of course, a boundary. No one wants an investor who's just hitting them up every single 2 hours, every 5, 10 days a week, whatever, but it's just, you got to be able to communicate, as simple as it is, but then also be willing to learn. Like some people just can't take feedback. So when an investor challenges your model, your structure, is that person cocky, or are they confident, and can they take feedback?
Yeah, no, that's a very good point. Let me ask you guys this: what hurdles does the manufactured housing industry face, in the future, say the next 5 to 10 years?
I would almost say supply. I think the demand's there, but it's the supply there. I know Ryan Gibson, I think is his name, a gentleman who's developing up here in Washington, 200 and something plus community. And listening to his interview he did with Ryan Naris or Ian, I can't remember who it was, but talking about the how difficult it really is to build a mobile home park. And there might be 6 to 10 going on across the country right now. And so even though politicians say that, oh, we want affordable house and want this and that. Okay, well, then why don't you want us to develop? Why don't you want us to expand? Why aren't you working with us? And so I think that's one thing as we're continuing to grow, is recognizing that it's going to kind of be hard if you have to expand your park or make that business model work. And so, because not every city or state wants to work with you in that sense.
And I kind of see that as a good thing.
Right.
Because, right, like for people that own mobile home parks, if you can't build any more, that limited supply, really, it kind of safeguards your asset, safeguards your investment. So,
well, and I'll touch on that too, because I know Frank touches on that a lot of both those paradoxes. One being that the fixed supply obviously is driving the demand and the value of these parks up and protecting that asset long term. And then but then he also talks about how municipalities hate them, right? They don't want them coming in. They lose money, and so new parks are kind of out of the question. My biggest fear is like, obviously, yeah, it's like buy all the parks up and you're fine and just hold them. But is the age of the homes, all these pre-HUD homes that we're seeing, and it's like some parks are filled with hundreds of them, and it's like if operators aren't coming in and infilling new homes, like that's kind of my fear, is like, will the rate of because we're demolishing these parks at a quicker rate than we're building them, right? So is that rate going to increase as we're not doing infill with new homes? And that's where I'm a huge advocate for, and I know Frank is, for 21st and what they're doing, is like, we want to combat some of the stigmas with newer, nicer homes, and it's like, you can do it. You got to go the extra mile. And so maybe you have some insight on that, but that's my biggest fear, is like, what happens when, 50% of these homes aren't even habitable anymore.
That is a really good point. And I think, younger operators like us, that'll be a challenge ongoing, right? Is the hidden CapEx costs, as Ryan Naris refers to it. Like you have a tenant owned home, you buy it, you don't consider, that home turning over. But then eventually a tenant just moves out and they just leave the home. They say, here's the title, you guys take it. And then you take it over, and it's a 10-foot wide, tiny home, and, it needs $12,000 worth of work. And you're like, geez, that's not even worth it. I'm not going to be able to make that happen. So I think one point you brought up is the 21st mortgage. I think that's great, right? Like, it helps the cash program. But, I think it would be nice if there was like, government, like a government program, right, for the financing of these homes direct to the purchaser of the manufactured homes, to help them, purchase homes and have better debt on these things, where the park owners don't have to necessarily get involved, right? Because on the cash program, the park owner is guaranteeing the loan with the resident. There is some, collateral there and benefit, but yeah, I think that's a good point. We need that fresh home supply, to filter out these older homes, most definitely.
Yeah.
And that's something. Go ahead, Noah. Well,
and I'll say this too, and I know I'm kind of backtracking. Alex knows I'm all over the place all the time, but is when an investor is looking at an operator's deal and they're saying, oh, we're going to use 21st Market, we're going to use Triad, we're going to use Legacy, we're going to use this and that. Are they approved? Do they have dealer license in those states? Because that's what we're going through right now. And getting approved through 21st and getting the dealer's license in these states, it's a lot of work. And fortunately, our underwriting doesn't rely on that. But I think if someone's never really actually been in those shoes, they might estimate on how easy it's going to be when it's a lot of work. Yeah. And so something to keep in mind.
Oh yeah. And it can take 6 months, right, to get approved for the cash program. And then you got to order your homes, right? And then, this is just from my experience. Like we got like $150,000 line of credit is what it was, like through the cash program. So we're, maybe 3 homes, so you wait 6 months and then you're only able to infill 3 homes. And then if those sell well, then they'll increase your line of credit to more. But then to order the homes and get them delivered right now is taking like a year.
Right.
So you really have to change your pro forma, of when you're thinking you're going to have an occupied lot.
And you don't know this unless you're in the trenches, because you talk to the 21st guys, you talk to Clayton or whoever the manufacturer, like 3 to 6 months backup, but yet it's really a year. So it's the same thing. You have to be realistic about it.
But it is where us operators have to come together. It sounds cheesy, but it is a competitive, hot industry right now. It's a hot sector, but it's like the more we can come together and let this, let the entities see this demand and see how, it sounds cheesy and ambitious, but I have this vision of, making mobile home parks cool again. And just like a lot of us operators do, is like, getting some of the younger crowd in there, getting some better direct to consumer loan products like you were talking about, and seeing how we can, us operators are going to keep doing our thing, and we're going to keep bringing in homes. And the more we can work with the municipalities instead of against them, the better. And so definitely hopeful, and we'll add value to that movement as we see our opportunity for sure.
Yeah, most definitely. So let me ask you this. What is the value proposition at Mavdon Investments, and what makes you guys different from other operators out there?
It's a good question. I think, and that's a big question a lot of investors have to look at, because there's some amazing operators and there's some amazing deals. And I think the biggest thing is you have to, like, for us, what sets us aside is I think we built really good relationships with our investors, and they know and trust us, and they're confident in our ability to fulfill what we promised them. And so I think if we can get nitty gritty with, we got our systems, we do great at marketing, we're trying to better infill, whatever. And I just think that's one thing that's helped us grow is our relationships with our investors, that they know that we're going to do whatever it takes to protect their money, to protect their legacy. Because that's the big thing, is they're putting a lot of trust onto us. And so they need to know that we're going to do whatever it takes, work till 2 a.m, get up at 4 a.m, like to take care of the capital preservation. And so I think that's just one thing that comes to my mind.
Yeah. And so I'll touch on that. I mean, our motto on our website is improving communities and providing affordable quality housing, quality affordable housing. So that comes first, right? I mean, that's our business model. Is we aren't slumlords, we're good operators, and we're coming in and we're improving these communities. We're making them nicer. We're helping the tenants. We get gratification from that. And we do have a spot in our heart for the affordable housing crisis and helping these communities. So that comes first. Then how we fund these deals is with investor capital. And so that it's very crucial, first and foremost, before providing any sort of return, is to protect your investor capital, right? That comes number one. And so we make sure that we do everything we need to be doing to be buying quality parks and be doing quality management to protect our capital. And then the cherry on top is them getting a return on their investment. So if you sum that up, we improve communities and provide investors a return on their capital. And the way we do that and grow our network is just through transparency and honesty. I think that's the biggest thing. It's not our website or our deal flow, because we don't have that huge of a reputation where we've been in the industry for 2 years. It's the fact that when people talk to us, they feel like we're honest, we're open, and we're not trying to hide anything. And so for active operators out there, that's the biggest advice I can get, is not to flaunt, but just to, have that growth mindset, that pupil mindset of ask questions and grow and be honest. And We've lost deals because of it, but we are where we are because of it too, so.
Oh, that's huge. That's huge. I appreciate you guys sharing that. Well, wow. I mean, Dylan, Alex, this has been an absolute amazing show. I really appreciate you both coming on. If our listeners would like to get a hold of you guys, what's the best way for them to do so?
Yeah, definitely join our Facebook group where we're just, Andrew's in there, a lot of guys in there. We're just kind of another group amongst many trying to add value to operators and share deals. It's Elite MHP Investing. And then just our website, mavdon.com. You can contact us through there, email us, get on our email list. And absolute pleasure being on here. Hope we added value to you guys, and love learning from you, Andrew. And you've been a big catalyst for our growth too, and just watching and learning from you and your guests. So,
yep, second that.
Well, thank you guys. Yeah, I'm learning as well on these episodes. That's been the biggest takeaway for me is, I'm interviewing all of these awesome operators in different stages, right? From huge funds all the way down to buying their first park, and I'm just learning from their experiences, and it's been a lot of fun. It really has. So let me ask you guys this: one final tip to investors interested in getting into the space. What would be like your number one tip that you would give them?
This is for active investors, passive investors?
I would say passive investors. Yeah, just interested in the space. Like if they were going to do one thing, what's the most important?
Educated. Like, I think it's very important for investors to be educated. And I think if you're a doctor and a lawyer and you run a tech company or whatever it is, like, focus on your craft, but you should know it's your responsibility and your due diligence to know what you're investing in. And so I think understand the space a little bit. Like, you should, when your operator is talking or sharing what's going on in the operation, you should be like, okay, yeah, I understand that because I went to this boot camp, I've watched these videos. And so that's, I think, important is it's not always, it's important that operators are educating their investors, but I think investors should already know a lot of the stuff. And so I think that's really important for them. So listening to Andrew's podcast, listening to other podcasts out there and just learning is important.
Yeah. And then I think the biggest thing is like knowing your goals going in, whether you're investing in mobile home parks or stock market or any other exchange for that matter. It's like, if you don't know your goals going in, you might just lose money or you might miss opportunities, right? If you're like, it sounds good, but it could be better. It's like, what are kind of your cash goals? What kind of returns are you looking to get? Are you looking to own long-term? Again, kind of those fundamental questions, and then find an operator that's going to help align with that. And I just think look at a lot of deals, be on a lot of lists and see what everyone's offering and get on the calls with these operators. We love talking to investors and just telling them how we work, and it doesn't always pan out, but we know maybe down the road it will. And so, but I think also don't be afraid to execute. If you know your goal in mind and the returns you want to make and what you're looking to accomplish, then when the right deal comes, all you got to do is verify the operator and execute.
Yeah,
that's great.
Of course, educate. That goes. I mean, obviously, anyone listening is already listening to the best podcast, the Passive Mobile Home Investing, and so that's they're already way ahead in that sense. But yeah, keep educating, reading. I love what Frank and Dave offer. I love his kind of historian approach on just the importance of mobile home parks and why you should own a piece of mobile home parks. I think the better you can understand that, the more you'll be ready to kind of move on some deals. So
I agree totally. And that was great advice, guys. Well, thank you so much again for coming on the show. That is going to do it for today, folks. Thank you all so much for tuning in. Hey, are you getting value out of this show? If so, would you mind please going over to iTunes and leaving the show a quick 5-star review? I have a goal of hitting over 100 5-star reviews by the end of 2021. And it would mean the absolute world to me if you could help contribute to that. Thanks ahead of time for making my day with your 5-star review of the show.